Edge of Eternities will be releasing on August 1st, and there is a big subset known as the Stellar Sights bonus sheet that is lands only, available in both play and collector boosters. And if you guys haven't been following the coverage, the one thing that's really interesting about this subset is there are a lot of really good reprints. It's a large sheet, and honestly, when we get those large bonus sheets, there are bound to be a lot of duds, but at least some of the duds in this still have some really cool artwork. What I want to talk about in today's video is just some of the best land reprints in this bonus sheet, kind of where you can expect to find them, and where I think they're going to go in terms of value. So let's jump right into the video. If you guys do enjoy, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think of the land subsheet and what you think is the best reprint that we're getting in here. Was there something that missed the cut that maybe you would have liked to see that did not? Let's dive into it. And one of the things I do want to mention quickly about this is, in addition to having the regular, what they're calling the Stellar Sights sheet, there is also an alternate artwork variant for every card. This is the, it's called, I think it's called the Stellar Sights posters. So you have the opportunity to get either the poster or the Stellar Sights in that slot. And in collector boosters, you actually have the possibility of getting them in Galaxy foil as well. That's probably a little tricky for anyone looking to do a complete set, because there are technically 4 versions of each. But I think if you're just looking to, you know, kind of rip open and get some good lands, some good hits, really maybe just focus on the non-Galaxy foils. I think the Galaxy foil lands are going to be very expensive for the desirable cards, but we'll have to see what the pull rates are once the set is actually out and about. Lotus Field is a really strong reprint, and I have to say I'm a huge fan of the artwork on this, specifically on the poster one. The regular one is okay, but the ship on it and the gold border just doesn't really work for me personally. I think a lot of people might like it, but the one thing about Lotus Field is it's a very, very strong card, and it has not really had a lot of reprints, so it was getting up there in price. It wasn't crazy, but it certainly was not super cheap, so it's nice that it will now get that. I don't know how much of a drop in price it will see, but I think you'll have a chance to get it fairly affordably at this point, you know, in some version or another. The one thing also that I wanted to add is that the likelihood of pulling a poster card in a play booster is around 1 in 20. I'm sorry, 1 in 8 packs, so 3 in 24. You're looking at around 3 to 3.5 per box on average. In collector boosters, I believe you're guaranteed 1 in every pack. I don't know if that's 100% valid, but I believe it is. You're going to get at least 1. We should know in a couple of days when people start opening Edge of Eternities and we're able to actually see what the ratios look like. But I believe in terms of just getting a base version of one of these lands, it is 1 in every pack in collector boosters. There might even be the possibility for multiples if there's wildcard slots. I don't know. Now, Petrified Field is another decent reprint here. This card's only had 1 real print, and that was in Odyssey. It was on the list, but again, that's kind of hard to factor in as like a high value reprint. This one is pretty cool, and it doesn't look like this actually has Galaxy foils. Now, I don't know if only a select number of these lands are going to have Galaxy foils, or if they just haven't done the full gallery yet, so these aren't up. But either way, it is available both, of course, as a mythic in the regular and the poster frame. Just incredible artwork, and I'm not going to say that every single time, but it's just important to note like how good these actually look, and I can't wait to see what they look like in person. But it's a good card. It's obviously really, really interesting. This is coming out in conjunction with the Edge of Eternities Commander deck, which really likes land sacrificing, so this works super well for that, and things that want to trigger off of lands leaving the graveyard, adding the graveyard, or what have you, can definitely get some good value off of this, so it's a solid inclusion here. Deserted Temple, another really good card. Not the craziest in terms of value. It was in Modern Horizons 3 and a Commander deck, but its more premium versions did hold a good bit of value. There's obviously a Surge foil one out of Lord of the Rings, and I think that one was actually serialized. It was Weathertop here, if you guys see that. So it's been a little bit since it got a reprint, but in terms of like accessible reprints, whatever, it really wasn't super expensive. The one out of Modern Horizons had done a lot to drive down the value, but this does look really cool, and it's a good card that can definitely work well with certain lands. If you have lands you can tap for different effects, or lands you can tap to do different things, you get some good value there. Grove of the Burn Willows, sorry, reading is apparently complicated, is a really good card, and it's very interesting because it's like a Pain land, but the opponent gains the life instead. I don't believe there's a full cycle of these. I think there's only like maybe this one and maybe one other, and even that I'm not 100% sure on. But last time this saw any reprint was in the Zendikar Rising box topper sheet, the bonus sheet there, and prior to that was, you know, Iconic Masters, etc. It has never been widely accessible, really, but hopefully it being reprinted here will do that. I know it does have some combos, but in general, it's just a solid dual land. It you know, the opponent gaining life is annoying, but there are definitely cards that trigger off the opponent gaining life that you can do stuff with this that makes it worth looking at. And again, just solid if you're playing those colors as a non-tapped land that can enter and give you the ability to do some things. High Market is another good reprint, not crazy value, but not dirt cheap either, and it was reprinted in Final Fantasy Commander. I do think this version obviously will do a little bit better for itself. It does have some really nice artwork here on both of them. If you're like me and think the gold borders are kind of tacky, I totally get it. I'm definitely leaning towards, you know, waiting to see what they look like in person before making a final judgment call, but overall I think they are kind of not the best decision in terms of how those cards are formatted, especially because on some of the cards they like cover up some of the text, which is just interesting. But it's a good reprint, it's a good card, it can work really well with things that want to trigger creatures dying and life gain, so it works out well there. Mirror Pool is another card that I like a lot. It's, again, not super expensive, but definitely a good card that is very scarce and could, over time, become more in demand. Being able to use it to copy into the sorceries, there are not a lot of lands that do that. It also can create tokens that are copies of other creatures you control. You do have to pay wastes or colorless in order to be able to use that effect, so some decks are going to get much more use out of this than others, but it is a really solid card and another good inclusion here. I don't know if it's going to be the mythic you're going to be, you know, chomping at the bit to pull, because it's not super pricey. Like I said, it does have multiple prints, but this is the nicest version of it to have come out, and for decks that do play it, I presume people will want to be after picking those up. Plaza of Heroes is a really good card. I was just talking to some friends about recently about how this card has not seen a reprint. It was in Dominaria United. It is also very, very strong. It's very much good in Legendary Matters decks. Obviously, you can use the mana of any color to cast legendary spells. You can use it like a Mox Amber to add a mana of any color among legendary permanents, and you can exile it to give legendary creature you control hexproof and indestructible, so it has a lot of versatility. It's a very good card. It was still sub $10, but as time passes, it's, you know, these lands tend to go up if they see play, and this is a good opportunity to kind of get out ahead of that. So I really like the reprint inclusion here for this. Reflecting Pool, always a good card, right? Last time we saw this was in, well, it was in the Commander decks for Lord of the Rings, I believe, as well, not Commander decks, I'm sorry, Box Toppers, and then it was also, it's been in a couple Secret Lairs, Mystery Booster, but I think the last time we had a real full reprint of this was actually Baldur's Gate in 22, so it's been about 3 years. Just a really strong card. It obviously isn't the best turn one play because you need to make sure you have other lands out, but Reflecting Pool is always a card people look at, especially in Commander. I don't know its play level in Modern, but I would imagine that maybe in some capacity it sees play there. Just a good reprint, though, that has always, you know, continued to do well for itself. It does have a foil version for Mystery Booster 2 in the Future Sight slot, so it was technically printed at the end of last year, but it's kind of hard for me to consider that like a full-on reprint, especially considering how infrequently those Future Sight cards actually popped up in those packs. Swarmyard, talk about some sick artwork. Not too expensive. It was in Bloomburrow Commander. It's gotten a couple prints, but the artwork here is top tier. I think it just looks sick, like the light exploding from the creature. And this is really popular in, you know, in tribal decks that can use it. Insects are getting a whole ass Commander deck coming out, so this is a great timing on the reprint. And of course, I mean, rats and squirrels, both very popular. Spiders, maybe somewhat popular. Not great, though. There's just not a great assortment of spiders to play around with, but it's a good reprint. It's always good to have more of this, and I do think it's probably one of the more premium versions, unless Time Spiral, I mean, the OG Time Spiral foil probably has some good value, but otherwise not exactly the most easily accessible card. Just a pretty good card across the board. Thespian Stage. Now this one is interesting because this card is pretty cheap. It's been reprinted plenty of times. It is definitely not super expensive, but it is a high value version, a high premium version, I suppose, whatever you want to call it, of a card that is extremely good. It obviously works really well with Dark Depths. It works well with Lotus Field. Thespian Stage is very commonly played in multiple formats where it is legal, and it is a very good card that just has a lot of application. So it's a good reprint. It's one of those cards that like is a nice inclusion here. It's not a bulk rare necessarily because it does have a lot of playability, so it'll probably be worth a couple bucks for people that want to get an upgraded version, and it's certainly better than some of the other options that they've given us in there. Eldrazi Temple, the artwork here, one of my favorites. I think it just looks so sick. It's a really good card. Eldrazi continue to get new cards over time, and this card continues to not get as many prints over time, right? I think the last time it got a print was in Commander Masters as an uncommon, a very large set, pretty hard to grab from that set. And then, you know, you go back to list promos and dual decks and stuff. Just, it's one of those cards that we've seen after a certain amount of time passes will go back up in value. So great, again, to get ahead of it. I think as a rare, it's awesome that it's like going to be fairly easy to get. It should be slightly affordable, but if you're looking to play Eldrazi and you don't have this card, now might be a good opportunity to pick it up once the set comes out. Strip Mine, very, very good card, very pricey card too. Very toxic card. On top of that, sack it, destroy a land. Obviously, people don't like land destruction. It's banned in Legacy. It's really only legal in Commander and legal in Vintage, but it is a good card that has plenty of ways to loop it, especially in that new Insect Commander deck. Whether or not you like the card, it definitely sees play for a reason, and it's a good reprint here. I mean, it's definitely a card that some people are going to want to get their hands on, and I just think it's solid to include those high-value cards in here. And I think the last time we got a real reprint for Strip Mine was actually, other than the Secret Lair, was actually in Zendikar Rising. Box toppers. So, you know, it's been a bit, and it's definitely nice to see it coming out, depending on who you ask, of course, because some people are not going to like that. Inkmoth Nexus, a card people have been wanting a reprint for forever. It was only printed and mirrored in Besieged, and then it was in a couple of Secret Lairs. We have not seen it since, and its value has just continued to go up. So it is a really good reprint. It's a very solid card. It's a land that can have Infect, which is just kind of crazy in and of itself. I know it sees play in Modern, obviously a good card for Commander as well. Just another nice reprint. Blinkmoth Nexus in here as well, nowhere near the same value, but still a solid card. I do think the price on this is, you know, going to be a little bit more reasonable compared to where it was now that we know it's getting a reprint, but it's still a card to keep an eye on. Ancient Tomb is absolutely massive, probably the biggest reprint in the set. Not probably, it definitely is. This card is extremely good. You could argue that it is it's a win more card in some situations, but it's also just so solid to be able to ramp and get you going faster. Colorless decks will love it, but a lot of decks, if you can play this, generally, you know, you should. But it was super, super expensive. It was printed in Lord of the Rings, and I think the lowest it got to was like maybe 80 for a little while, and then, you know, has gone back up since to like over, you know, 150. Search Whale went over 250. It was in the Zendikar Rising, etc., but it has not had an accessible print ever, and this is a mythic and a bonus sheet, so I don't know how accessible this is going to be either, but you might have a chance if you're cracking a box to pull one. Maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe there'll be a window to actually grab this under 100. I know, you know, a lot of people play budget. I get that. I'm not a huge fan of proxying myself, but I respect people who do, if that's your thing. So obviously it may not be in your price range, but for me, hopefully have an opportunity to pick this card up at a price that's at least somewhat agreeable, because it is just really, really good, and it's going to do a lot of things to boost the value of the set as a whole. Similarly, Mana Confluence, a very, very strong card, generically speaking, one of the best lands, period, for Commander. And obviously is legal in Pioneer as well. Modern, just it's a pain land that gives you mana of any color. Pretty much an auto-include if you're playing, you know, more than one color, I would think. And, you know, last time we saw it get a full reprint was in Commander Legends, and I think that was as a buy-a-box promo. So the real last time it's gotten any kind of reprint outside of a Secret Lair was actually Zendikar Rising Expeditions, which, you know, kind of a theme we got going on here. Really good card, really good reprint. Hopefully it'll be somewhat more affordable, but again, these are mythics. They are very scarce, and who knows? But it's good to see it in here. Anytime we get an opportunity to drive the prices down on some of this stuff short term is good. And finally, Gemstone Caverns, definitely another card that is super high up there in value. $50 plus at the cheapest. It was on Lord of the Rings. It was on the list. It was in Time Spiral. Doesn't have the largest assortment of availability, but the card can absolutely be game-changing if you open it, and it's just so good for so many reasons, and I'm really happy to see a reprint here. I don't know if it'll be enough to really drive it down beyond maybe just a short bit of pricing, but if this settles at 35, 40, that's a really good move for people that want the opportunity to get the card. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it drops more than that. I don't know. It's hard to predict the future without knowing the ratios, but generally speaking, this is kind of what we're looking at here. So there are a lot of good cards. Now, I covered slightly over 10 here. The one thing to mention is, and I'm not going to go through everything, but there are a lot of cards on this list that are nothing special. They may even be decent cards, and they look cool, but they're not going to be anything great from a value perspective. So the chance of hitting a good land on here is certainly lower than the chance of hitting a different land. I believe the total number of cards in the sheet set It's either 45 or 50. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I think we were waiting on one to be revealed. Based on the number crunch, though, I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. And you will have people chasing Galaxy foils, which should make some of these a little bit more affordable, which is obviously a good thing for people that want to have a chance to get them. But Galaxy foil versions of stuff like Ancient Tomb, Mana Confluence, I can't imagine that's going to be anywhere near the realm of affordability unless they pop up super commonly, which just doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. That being said, let me know what you guys think of the lands. I think there's a lot to like about this subset. I do think there's a lot of filler in here too. So just, you know, in the interest of fairness, kind of call that out. But I'm excited about it. I'm hopeful it'll do a good thing for value. Let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you in the next video.